I thought that was pretty great. I thought I might want to spend the rest of my life seeing that happen. So that was a long time ago, and I've been the director. My father, Glenn Doman, is the founder of the institutes. He founded the institutes in 1955, so we've been at it for a long, long time. So I want to welcome you. We know that some of you in this audience know us very, very well. And of course, we're welcoming you back to a place you know well. And I want to welcome those of you who have never been to the Institutes. It's a lovely campus. Let's take a look. I think we have a picture here that we're going to put up. There we are. There's beautiful Clark Hall, our oldest building. We have a beautiful campus. And, after welcoming those stroke patients so many years ago, it wasn't long before children began to come to the institutes, and those children started to come from all over the world, over 100 nations. And those children were brain injured children, like our stroke patients and the adults who had head injuries who came here originally. Our kids had every kind of etiology, every kind of history before coming. And some kids were blind and deaf and paralyzed. Some kids walking and running kids, but they couldn't speak, or they had very severe learning problems. Some kids had very mild problems, but a mild neurological problem can create a gigantic problem in school. So perhaps they couldn't make it in school because of those problems. So we've seen every kind of kid, from the most hurt to the least hurt. And these kids were hurt in the central nervous system. They still come here every day. Right now in the clinic, we have kids. So those kids were all brain injured kids. But in the world in which we live, and again, we'll go to that next slide. In the world in which we live, brain injured kids are not called brain injured kids. They are called they're given many different symptomatic labels. And those labels are not helpful to our children. In fact, they are harmful more than helpful. And let's look at some of the labels. This is a very typical list of what our kids are called: brain damage, mentally retarded, cerebral palsy, epileptic, autistic, athetoid, hyperactive, ADD, ADHD, global developmental delay, Down syndrome. That's just a handful of the labels. There are, actually, the last time we counted, over 300 different symptomatic labels, all for what is, in fact, a kid hurt in the central nervous system, in the brain. And it's just a matter of degree. Are they profoundly hurt? Are they moderately hurt? Are they mildly hurt? That's the reality for our kids. They're all brain injured kids. Well, today we're going to talk about nutrition. And we've chosen 4 nutritional fixes that we believe are brain changers for our kids. And they're so important that any one fix all by itself could make a huge difference for a child. It's hard for us to speak about nutrition here at the Institutes without a very strong tribute to the great Adele Davis. Adele Davis was really the mother of modern American nutrition. It was Adele Davis back in the 70s that really put nutrition on the map. Before Adele Davis, a very significant part of the American public thought that if you could eat it, if it tasted good, it was food. And it was Adele who really came along and coined the term junk food. There really was no concept of that before Adele. Adele really, really taught us that not everything we were putting in our mouths was actually food. And she really dotted the I's and crossed the T's. We were so lucky because in 1970, Adele Davis found us and we found her. And she came to these institutes and she really changed our outlook on nutrition and what our kids were eating. And I had the great privilege to work side by side with her in 1970 when she first came. And we did together, we changed the regimes of over 600 kids. It was a huge mountain to climb, but we did it. And I'm here to say that that was life-changing for those kids. Their progress on our program got even better, even faster. There were certainly children then whose lives were changed and saved by Adele, who would not have made it without her proposals. And over the years, many, many kids who we've seen who live really in a very precarious state between life and death, because sometimes we see very, very hurt kids who are in and out of the emergency room. The things that Adele taught us gave us the tools we needed to save those kids' lives. And that's been a wonderful thing. So we really can't talk about nutrition at these institutes without talking about the great Adele Davis, author of Let's Eat Right to Keep Fit, Let's Have Healthy Children, Let's Cook It Right, and the greatest of all, Let's Get Well. These books were all wild bestsellers, and they're wonderful books. You know, Adele said, well, she said many, many things. Next slide, please. Adele said, building health through nutrition requires putting it into practice. And I think that's just a very quiet way of saying, if you don't do it, nothing happens. And, you know, today for us, we're going to do, we've chosen 4 points. And I want to kind of make a deal with you about those 4 points. If there's any one of these 4 points we're about to make, and you don't even know what they are yet, if there's any one of them that rings true for you, that you say, I buy that, that would be good for my kid, then I would like your agreement right now, if possible, to say, yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to start today. Today is the day. I'm going to start doing that. Because we believe if you do that, you're going to see a change, and a good change. And for us, our whole life is seeing our kids change. We not only want to see our kids change, but we actually want to see our kids change every day, get better every day. So how many people will agree? How many people will say, yes, I'm going to change. If I agree with one of these points, I'm going to change it today, not tomorrow, not next week, today. So if you could give me a yes or a thumbs up or something in that chat box, that's what we want. We want to feel like your kid is going to get a benefit immediately. Yes, hola, we've got, looks good. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up and a lot of yeses. That makes me feel great. Well, now let's see which one of these 4 things may indicate for you. So let's take a look. First, I'd like to start with just a very simple true and false. A little simple true and false. And you might, again, record this in your own on a piece of paper so you know which one you said true and which one you said false. Here's my first question. Dairy is an essential part of a healthy diet. True or false? There's another slide there. True or false? Put that on a scrap of paper or in your chat box. Okay, next question. Wheat protein causes significant health problems for many children. True or false? Whole grains and beans are the easiest foods to digest. True or false? Next question. Fruit juice is always a healthy choice for your child. True or false? I'm seeing looks good. False, false, true, true, false, false. There was a mixed bag on that one. Okay, let's now come and answer these questions. First one was dairy. Dairy is healthy. True or false? False. Next one was wheat can cause big problems for digestion in our kids. The answer is that's true. Big, big, big problems. Next question was beans and grains are the easiest things to digest. That's false. They are not. And last one was probably the easiest question. Fruit juice is always a good choice in a healthy diet. That one is false. Okay, well, I don't know how you did, but looks like many of you are on top of this information. I think our families really divide very heavily between mothers and fathers who have really done their homework in nutrition and they're right on top of all the newest information, and then families who this is a whole new area and they're not aware of some of the things that could have a huge influence on their kids. Also, the challenge for us is our families come from all over the world. So we have Chinese cuisine in some homes, Indian cuisine, Mexican, Japanese, Italian. By the way, just mentioning those ancient cuisines of planet Earth, they're all incredible food. But sometimes with our kids, we have to step back from those ancient cuisines and simplify heavily to get the good result that we know we can get. So let's come back now and visit each of these points. Do not give your child dairy. Yeah, for some of you, that's going to be a shocker. And the question is, why? Why? We were all raised in a world where, milk and cheese and yogurt, these were all, they're very important parts of much of the cuisine of the world. Let's take a look at really the truth about cow's milk. Let's just take a quick look. Next slide, please. Cow's milk is designed for baby cows, not human beings. Cow's milk contains cow hormones for the development of the calf. These hormones are not good for human children. Cows are actually given antibiotics and extra growth hormones, which are harmful to human beings. Of course they are. The ingestion of cow's milk lowers the function of the human immune system. We are drinking the baby formula of another creature, and it's a creature that's quite different. I mean, cows eat grass. They're herbivores, we're omnivores. Drinking the baby formula of a cow makes no sense. And by the way, always a question is, well, what about goat's milk? Let's handle the goat's milk question. Goat's milk is designed for baby goats, not human beings. Goat's milk contains goat milk hormones. We need to drink the milk of our own species. We need to have breast milk, a phenomenal and amazing formula, which even now we haven't completely studied. It's just in the last 10 years that we've become sensitive to the fact that there are things in mother's milk that the baby gets that he can't get from anything else. There are bacteria there for the baby that if you aren't nursed as a baby, you don't have those good bacteria in your gut, and there's no other way to get them. I'm a baby boomer, and baby boomers were the first generation that were put on bottles and given formula. And guess what? For those of us who were put on those bottles and drank that formula, we didn't get that good bacteria. Does that sound like a good idea or a bad idea? So I'm thinking it's a bad idea. So the only nursing formula that our children should be having is mother's milk. And by the way, it is baby formula. The idea that we should be drinking milk when we're 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 and 25 and 30 is absurd. But here in the United States of America, 35-year-olds may drink a quart of milk a day, a quart of baby formula from another species. It makes no sense. And it carries with it big problems. You know, if you said to me right now, at the institutes, what do you change first in a kid's diet? You're looking at it. We take every single child off of dairy products, and almost uniformly, we see a difference for that child rapidly, an improvement. And for some of our kids, very significant. You know, kids who are in and out of the hospital every month during the wintertime, no hospitalizations. What was the change? We took them off dairy. So this is number one. And it's a very important one. Let's look at the wheat question. Do not give your child wheat. And a big reason is the gluten in the wheat. Now, this has now become very well known. Thanks to our friend Novak Djokovic, who discovered this when he couldn't get as fit as he wanted to get, and he realized that this was a problem, and he took wheat out of his diet, and well, that story is well known. He's the number one tennis player in the world. So this can be a huge issue. Now, is it a huge issue for every single kid who we see? No, it's not. But for the children that it's a big issue, it's a gigantic issue. We see a significant number of children who not only do we take them off of wheat, but they stay off of wheat for the rest of their lives. Wheat causes such an enormous problem, particularly those kids who have problems with interest, concentration, focus. It often is changed dramatically by taking wheat out of the diet. Kids whose behavior can be unpredictable or erratic, wheat can often be at the bottom of that woodpile, causing the problem. Let's look for a minute. Let's just step back and look at how food impacts a child's health and brain function. And this information is a little technical, but bear with me. It's understandable, a little technical, but totally understandable. And I think you'll find it very important and fascinating at the same time. Let's take a look. What is the problem with milk and with wheat? These two things can cause such large problems for our kids. Why? Let's take a look. The peptide from gluten, which is the wheat protein, it's the wheat in the It's the protein in the wheat that's the problem. And from casein, the milk protein. These react with opiate receptors in the brain in the temporal lobes. Now, why is that important? The temporal lobes are involved in speech and auditory integration. Sound familiar? Does that sound like your kid? Any problems in speech? Any problems in auditory integration? The reaction mimics the effects of opiate drugs like heroin and morphine and impacts language and hearing. Language and hearing. Many, many, many of our kids have huge language problems and huge hearing. Their hearing is so hyper. Everything bothers them. They're so sensitive. Everything bothers them. The peptide from wheat is actually called gluteomorphine. Gluten plus morphine. The peptide from milk is called caseomorphine. Casein plus morphine. Kind of shocking, but it shows you these foods that we consider everyday foods that we've been eating for centuries can create a very large problem for a significant number of our kids. And when we take them out, do we see language get better? Yes, we do. Do we see hearing get better? Yes, we do. Of course we do. So even though it's a little technical, I thought you'd like to have that information because we find our parents, the parents who come to us, they are characterized by the fact they want to know why. They're willing to make big changes, but they want to know why. And we are very happy to supply that information. If we know why, we're very happy to supply it. Well, we've said that grains, whole grains and beans are hard to digest. They're not easy to digest. We've been raised in a world where we've assumed, oh, these are the easy things. You know, when mother is saying, what's the first thing I should feed my baby? She's often told rice or oats. And I think that starts the idea that these are somehow the easiest things to digest. Well, it turns out that just the opposite is true. These are among the hardest things to digest. And when you have something in your gut that isn't digested properly, it can cause a world of pain and problem. So let's take a look. What's the problem with undercooked grains and beans? Well, here's the problem. Undercooked grains and beans cause poor digestion, poor absorption, reflux, gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea. And actually, if you look at that constellation of problems, if you have a child who's prone to having seizures, is he more likely to have a seizure if we're feeding him undercooked grains and beans? Of course he is. Of course he is. If you've got a child who's got behavior problems, do you think he's going to be more prone to those temper tantrums if he's got something going on in the gut? So, yes, it's very important to take a look at the condition of the gut because for our kids, that's where a lot of problems are. And you know, there is a direct connection between the brain and the gut. If the brain's not happy, it is said, the gut's not happy. If the gut's not happy, the brain's not going to be happy. You know, think about it for a moment. You're eating a beautiful meal and enjoying it and looking forward to that next bite of food, and someone calls you on the phone and gives you tragic, distressing information. What's the first thing that happens? You look at that plate and say, I'm not hungry. Take it away. I don't want that. immediately your gut is saying, no, don't put that in the body, because the brain has communicated upset. The connection is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for your whole life. And it's a very strong and immediate connection. If you put something in your belly and it gets in the gut and causes a problem, all of a sudden you're saying, gee, I can't think well today. I'm fuzzy. I've got a headache. What's going on with me? Well, the gut's not happy. The brain's not going to be happy. So these symptoms, which are very common in a hurt kid, one or all of these, are all signs of food in the gut that is not properly digested. And very frequently we find that it's the whole grains, the beans, the lentils that are the problem, because they're very, very difficult to break down. And if they arrive in the gut and the stomach did not break them down fully, big problems. So do we take them out of the diet? Do we eliminate them? Well, I have to say, in our most severe kids, we may actually remove them from the diet until these things settle down. We give the gut some relief. Because if you have poor digestion, poor absorption, reflux, gas, bloating, constipation, any of these symptoms, you can end up with real chronic inflammation in the gut. And a gut that's inflamed is just not going to be working well. It won't be just these foods that are not getting digested, but anything that's coming through is going to get short shrift. Well, what do we do about that? Is there a solution? And we found, we did a great deal of work on this, probably now 15 years ago. And we found if we soaked the grains, the beans, and the lentils for at least 3 hours, but not longer than that. Some of our mothers got enthusiastic and said, well, if 3 hours is good, I'm going to use 6 hours. No, they'll start to ferment. And not only will they not taste good, they'll start to be a problem if we have fermented grains. We don't want fermented grains. So 3 hours is sufficient. Then we slow cook them for 8 hours. Now, when we say slow cook, we mean in a slow cooker, not a pressure cooker, no pressure cooker, not a rice steamer, a slow cooker. It's a very low-tech piece of equipment. It's inexpensive. You know, probably 25 or 30 bucks, you can get a little one. It has slow, it has warm, it has high and off. It's not a high-tech piece of equipment. But when you put the grains in that slow cooker, the most important thing is to make sure that you add enough water or broth to hydrate those grains. Let's say you're putting brown basmati rice. Generally, with brown basmati rice, you would want 4 times the amount of water to the amount of grain. And hopefully when you wake up in the morning, you put it on at night, you wake up in the morning, you open up that slow cooker, and all that rice is fat and puffy and hydrated. It means it's essentially pre-digested. So when it goes in your child's belly, no big problem. When it moves from your child's belly to the gut, now it will be good for the gut because the gut can easily break it down. And of course, it has wonderful fiber. So that fiber is now useful to your child. So a child who was constipated, if he has properly slow cooked grain, now all of a sudden he's no longer constipated. The big trick is to get the ratio of water to grain correct. And for each grain, it's different, whether you're using steel cut oats or barley or amaranth, whatever it is, you have to play around with that ratio to make sure there's enough water. You get that nice puffy effect in the morning. But this works. If we do this for our kids, they can have the beautiful calories, because many of our kids are very underweight when they start on our program. the beautiful organic whole grains that are slow cooked, provide them with fiber and with the calories they need, but they have to be slow cooked. Well, let's come to our last point, maybe the shocker. Do not give your child bottled, canned, or packaged fruit juice. This is really an epidemic in the United States. American kids are guzzling down gallons of commercial juice. Well, what's wrong with all that commercial juice? Why we think of it as being a healthy choice. Why is it not a healthy choice? Well, it turns out that freshly juiced fruit only stays fresh for approximately 20 minutes. When we juice it, we squeeze it or we juice it, we expose it to oxygen, it starts to break down rapidly. And so within 20 minutes, the value of it drops hugely. If we put it in a bottle or a package or we can it, by the time we consume that, it's really just sugar water. It's just a pretty colored sugar water. And I don't think most mothers would knowingly just give their kids sugar water. I don't think a mom would take a glass of water, dump sugar in it, and say, here's a great drink for you. I think we get those juices because we think there'll be much more nutrition than if they had soda. And of course, soda is also terrible for our kids. But in fact, fruit juice has not much nutritional value. It's just sugar. So for our children, first of all, to hydrate the human body, the best hydration for the human body is pure water. So what you really want to do for your child is make pure water available. And it's interesting. If you do that, you will find he'll drink it, especially if it's really pure, it's good spring water, it tastes good. Tap water tastes so horrible. Most of the water that you and I are drinking tastes horrible because it's not really pure, delicious water, but a really fine quality spring water tastes great. Your child will drink that, and you will find that instead of needing 60 fluid ounces a day, it will drop dramatically because all that sugar water was making your child thirsty. As soon as you go to what's natural to the body, which is water, all of a sudden 24 fluid ounces and he's fine. Absolutely fine. That's all he really needs. And that's right. Would we never give juice to our kids? We give juice to our kids. But we remember that there's another type of juice aside from fruit juice. There's vegetable juice. And that's very nutritious. So it's really useful for you to have a juicer, a good blender, and something to squeeze citrus with. And then you can decide, are we going to have am I going to juice carrots and celery and fennel and put a bit of lime in there, make a fresh vegetable juice every day? That's the most high octane fuel you could make for your child and for yourself. I highly recommend mothers make fresh vegetable juice for themselves. But you can also juice apples and pears and all the delicious fruit that is in season. We would recommend that you bias yourself toward the low glycemic fruit. So stay away from the mango and the watermelon and use berries and the great fall deciduous fruits that are not so high glycemic. And this is simply because when you are feeding fruit, it is a simple sugar, and simple sugar feeds the bad bacteria in the gut. So if your child has a yeast overgrowth or problem with bad bacteria, and I'm sorry to say, but most of the kids who arrive here have pretty big problem with overgrowth of bad bacteria, you want to be very careful not to be feeding that bad bacteria. So for some of our kids, especially if their behavior is erratic, repetitive, temper tantrums, short attention span, some of those kids, we might actually, for the first 6 months, just take fruit out of the diet because we don't want to feed the bad bacteria. Then we get a big change in the child. We make those other nutritional changes. The child changes pretty dramatically. Then we might go with low glycemic fruit. So be careful of high glycemic food items. So if you're going to make juice, you're going to make juice fresh, and you're going to juice. If you take that apple and make a glass of apple juice, you're going to consume it immediately. You juice, you consume. If there's any left over, either get someone else in the household to drink it or throw it away. Don't put it in the fridge and have your child drink it later, because it will just turn to sugar water. Okay, well, I want to circle back to something I started with. I said choose one of these fixes that we believe are brain changers and start today. And I would ask you this. Choose the one that you say, that's for my kid. I'm doing that. No one's stopping me from doing that. I would take a point 12 weeks from today, put a dot there, and do that every day, very consistently for 12 weeks. And then write and tell us, how'd you do? What changes did you see? I think it's going to be very exciting for us in 12 weeks. Well, now we have come to an important point, and that are the questions we've just provoked. And first of all, some of your questions are so predictable on this subject that we want to handle the predictable ones right off the top, because that's going to help the greatest number of you. And the first one is, if I take out dairy, how will my child get enough calcium? Everybody asks that question. And we want to give you the answer to that question. There are many, many, many sources of calcium. The top 5 sources of calcium, write them down. Sardines, sesame seeds, cooked amaranth. It's a whole grain. Amaranth is actually the oldest grain, I think, in the world. Collard greens, fresh figs. Ooh, who doesn't love a fresh fig? Now, they're not the only sources of calcium. We've just given you the top 5. You can go and easily find out 50 sources of calcium. But you could start with that list, and you're going to find calcium goes up dramatically. And by the way, for those of you who have kids who don't chew very well, the sesame seeds can be roasted and buttered and used, blended up or ground, and they're delicious and a very high source of calcium. Next question. How much calcium does my child need? Well, again, jot it down if you need to. Between 7 months to 12 months, around 270 milligrams. Between 12 months and 3 years, 500 milligrams. Between 4 to 8 years, almost double, 800 milligrams. And between 9 years and 18 years, 1,300 milligrams. Those are the general recommendations. Okay, can I give my child pasta, pancakes, and bread? This will be the most unpopular answer of all the answers we give. The answer is simply no. And here's why. You cannot slow cook pasta. You cannot slow cook pancakes. You cannot slow cook bread. They all contain grains. And that means that when your child eats these things get into the gut. They are very hard to digest, and they cause your child problems. So if you decide to do the undercooked whole grains point of these 4 points, please eliminate pasta, eliminate pancakes, eliminate bread. then you'll get a result. Because in many of our kids' diets, the biggest thing causing them trouble is bread, because everybody eats bread. Every culture has some form of bread, and it creates problems in the gut. Now, here's a confusion that some moms have. They say, well, I'm using gluten-free products, so I'm going to use the gluten-free products for the pancakes, and I'm going to use gluten-free macaroni, and I'm going to use gluten-free bread. But in the case of the undercooked grains, it's not gluten that's the issue. It's that the grains themselves are hard to digest. Does everybody see this? So getting gluten-free bread will not solve the problem at all. The next question, very common. I know my child is not intolerant to gluten. Can I still give wheat products? Well, it's true. Some of our kids do not have gigantic problems with gluten. It's absolutely true. So, yeah, if you find that your child doesn't have that problem, if you've tested him, but I have to say, we take every kid who walks through the door here off of gluten for at least 6 months. And then we step back and we see, is he better? And then we may put him back on gluten and see what happens. So, yes, you can take him and get a test, or you can simply remove it and see if you get a good result. It's all about results. I'm sure you want to see your kid change as fast as possible. Okay. Last question that we have, it's very common. Are there any juices that I can give to my child? The answers are you can give virtually any vegetable, any fruit juice, although I'd avoid the high glycemic, as long as you juice it or puree it fresh and feed it to him immediately. We're not saying you can't have juice, but we're saying water is the best. 85% of his hydration should be water. But if you're going to give him juice, got to be fresh. And by the way, fresh juice tastes the best too. What a wonderful thing to have a little bit of real juice. That's pretty great. Okay, now we're going to take your questions if we can. So let's see what your questions are. Oh, I'm getting them handed to me as we speak. Oh, this is, I should have put this question up because it's so common. What is the best flour for pancakes and bread? It's true. You can make pancakes as long as you can make them from something that isn't whole grain. So you can use almond flour would be maybe the most common that's used. And it's a very tasty thing when they powder almond, and you can definitely make a pancake with it. You just have to be careful because sometimes these things are packaged and you go to buy them and it's 2/3 of it is almond powder and 1/3 is wheat. So if you're buying it already made into flour, really read the labels very, very carefully, because especially pancake mixes, they want the pancake to stick together. And the best thing to make it stick together are all those whole grains. So that would be our best recommendation. One question here, and this one's a tough one to answer. How do we supply milk for my child? Obviously, in the first year of life, breastfeeding, the first year to first year and a half. If you have a severely brain injured child in that first 18 months and you don't have breast milk, you're in trouble, because we haven't been able to find any formula that we believe is adequate for our kids. And we're searching the world all the time. If you have found a formula that you think is great, please send it to us so we can take a look at it, because formulas around the world have been being made for 50 years, but without really looking at what's in mother's milk. And so many of these formulas are very toxic to our kids. They cause reflux, they cause digestive problems. So we get our kids off these formulas and onto real food as rapidly as we can. And for most of our kids, that's the answer. Get to real food as safely and as rapidly as you can. Even with kids who come here and they are being tube fed, if the tube is not wide enough for food, we ask them to put in a tube that's wide enough so we can put blended food in that tube. It makes a huge difference. Huge difference. I have a question. Other than fruit, what snacks are recommended? Well, I have to say that nuts are a wonderful snack, but in our experience, nuts have to be organic. I think the insecticides, the pesticides really are a problem with nuts if they aren't raised and harvested correctly. We stay away from shelled nuts like pistachios and peanuts because there are molds associated with those shelled nuts. The nuts themselves are okay, but it's the storage in the shell that creates the problem. But nuts are very good. Our parents love to take vegetables and put them in those new air fryers and make a little crispy treat out of a sweet potato or a yam, or some other vegetable, carrots, and they make very good snacks. And of course, those snacks not only are tasty, but they're so much cheaper than the expensive healthy snacks that you find in the health food stores. They may be nice snacks, but they're very costly. So our mothers have gotten very clever at making their own snacks that way. Is millet good? Yeah, again, we slow cook millet. So yes, our kids do have millet. It is tasty. It is useful. I'm looking here. The question is, if you mill your own berry wheat, is it also then not recommended? Should we avoid milling our own wheat berries? I don't see why you milling them would be a problem. It's just you need to slow cook. That's the problem. So you have to figure out a way, if you're using a grain, that you can use that grain and it can be tasty and you can soak and slow cook. And or maybe mixing it with another grain that you're slow cooking. That might be one way to do it. And can you give us an example of a perfect eating day? Well, I have to say, one of the things that we do, because we do slow cook grains, we make a different porridge every night for at least 4 nights because we really like food rotation. Kids on our program, once they've been on our program for 12 months, by evolution, we switch them to food rotation, which is to say we are not repeating the same foods over and over. The weakest point of our kids' diets when they arrive here is that they're eating the same foods over and over and over again. And that makes a very narrow base. And kids, and this is true of all kids, not just her kids, all kids, kids train their mothers. Feed me this, don't feed me this. And mothers who want their kids to eat and be healthy and grow get intimidated. And so every day, with many kids, the variety gets less and less as mother says, well, he doesn't usually eat that. I'll take that out. And honestly, we have kids that arrive here and they're eating four things, a little bit of chicken, applesauce, yogurt, and French fries. And that's it. Yikes. Can you be healthy on that diet? Absolutely not. And of course, on our regime, we're taking everything out of there. Only chicken gets to stay in that regime. But here's the good news. The good news is when a kid arrives here and he's on such a narrow diet, and usually, by the way, he's not very healthy, his behavior is not very good, he doesn't sleep well, he's got all kinds of symptoms of this narrow diet. When we literally take away the foods that he should not be eating, like the dairy, like the wheat, start slow cooking, take away the fruit juice. When we do that, very rapidly, the gut starts to heal. Often, mothers will say within 4 or 5 days from taking away those 4 foods, which were the only foods he would eat, all of a sudden he'd eat a carrot. All of a sudden he'd eat some soup. All of a sudden, 2 weeks later, I'm feeding him real food. How is that possible? It's possible because the bad bacteria in the gut are running the show. And as soon as you take away the things the bad bacteria are eating, the bad bacteria start to die and the good bacteria start to take over. And all of a sudden, the kid is not craving bread. He's not craving applesauce. He's not craving that dairy. So you can see a very big change in a very short period of time when you change the gut. Mothers think it won't happen. They say, my kid's going to starve. If I take 3 of those 4 things away, he will starve. Good news, in all of our 68 years here at the Institutes, no child has ever starved. Doesn't happen. It turns out kids like to eat. They like to live. So I think, to answer your question, we would say to you, follow the rule. Don't feed the same thing every day. Don't feed the same thing every day. Make as much variety. If you gave your kid carrots today, then tomorrow, zucchini. The next day, something else. The next day, make the variety the king. And you will get a much wider nutrient base and a much healthier child. How do I know my kid's gut is healthy or not? Well, some of the symptoms we talked about, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, pain. If a child is experiencing pain, often our kids wake up at night and they're in pain because of gut issues. So, you have to look at the level of your kid's health, the energy. That for sure will help. Are eggs good for toddlers? Well, eggs are the most digestible animal protein. And surely they're one of the most versatile. You can do anything with an egg. So unless a child is specifically allergic to an egg, and there are some egg allergies out there, yes, we would definitely be using eggs with a toddler. Oh, it's a good question. Can you elaborate on slow 8-hour cooking of grains? 8 hours sounds too long for 4-to-1 ratio. Well, it might be. When you take the lid off of your grain in the morning, you want to see that rice puffed up, but no water there. If you open it up and the rice is floating in water, then you put too much water. Then you put it on high and you cook off that water. If you open the lid and it's all crispy on the edge, then you didn't add enough water. By the way, you can't add water after the cooking process. It'll taste horrible. Don't do that. Just suffer through the crispy rice, but the next day put a little more water in there. And as I say, for us, we would make that rice as rich and as tasty as possible. We would probably use half chicken broth, half water, or maybe all chicken broth. And we might chop up some onions, some garlic, so that you have this wonderful, tasty, if we wanted to be ready for breakfast in the morning. I'm sorry, I cannot read that. Okay, thank you. They're trying to indicate to me when to stop. When you look at that broth in the morning, that porridge you've made, it's so tasty. The night before, you might put in a little chicken. So when you wake up, you really have quite a beautiful meal almost ready. You have the chicken, you have the slow cooked rice, you steam a little bit of spinach, a little bit of zucchini, maybe some carrots, 3 vegetables, a green leafy, a green, a colored vegetable. And in 3 minutes, you have a beautiful breakfast. It's all ready. Very simple, but highly nutritious. I would take half of that slow cooked rice and save it for lunch. Put it away, put it in the fridge, save it for lunch. So now half of your lunch is already prepared. Okay. Okay. Well, now I have a few last things. For those of you who have a hurt child and you have questions that need to be answered, of course, as you probably know, through the year, we give the course, What to Do About Your Brain Injured Child, right here in the Valentine Auditorium. Good news, we do it online. So we just finished one this week. We had families from Croatia and China and Ecuador, all kinds of wonderful places in the course. So it's great that it is online now after 40 years of doing it in this room. And for those of you who have questions or need a consultation about your child, I believe they're going to put a link up here on the next slide. Maybe it's there. Do we have the next slide? There we go. You can get a free consultation using the link. That link will take you to a calendar where you can schedule time to talk with our staff and get your questions answered. We hope you'll do that. Well, great. I hope this has been useful. We will be back in the future. And any feedback from you is always helpful to tell us what you'd like us to be teaching next time. We did nutrition this time because we felt there was a lot of interest. So we can always circle back. We've only done 4 points. There's a lot more to learn in this area. And I hope you do that one thing. Because if you do it, your kid's going to get better. And you know, for us, it's not just that we want your kid to get better. We want him to be better every day. Every day. That's what we want for your kid. Okay? Okay, good. Take care. Hurry back.